Today I'm coming to you from the Craig Road Pet Cemetery here in Craig Road. I've passed by this cemetery hundreds of times. If you go to the left of me, I live a mile down the road. If you were to go right and go about 10 miles, you're going to come to the front gate of Nellis Air Force Base. Anyways, this cemetery has been around for nearly 40 years. It's been in operation for 40 years. And not only do they have thousands of pets buried here, but they also have about 300 humans buried here with their pets. Most of the human remains are all cremated with their cremated pets. Some famous people have pets here. Snoop Dogg, for one, has a pet here, but his pet's incognito somewhere and they don't disclose that information. Red Fox's pet is buried here too. And numerous actors and actresses and famous people have had pets cremated here. Like Nicolas Cage, Pat Morita, just to name a couple. They have 3 different sized crematoriums here for animals. The biggest one can cremate an elephant, something the size of an elephant. So I'm here today because I'm going to tell you a story, and it's a sad story, and when I first read about it, it kind of pissed me off. But this story begins in 1973. This story begins at the Oregon Zoo in 1973, and it's about an elephant named Stoney. Stoney was born in captivity to 2 parents who were captured in the wild and brought to the Oregon Zoo. Stoney was an Asian elephant, which is a much smaller version of his cousin, the African elephant. The distinct differences is he's smaller. They're rounded, smaller ears. They're actually a little bit more intelligent and easier to train. And they have 2 distinguished bumps on their forehead. But anyway, so Stormy's parents were brought to this zoo. Stormy was born on June 17th, 1973. So this zoo used elephants for research. And Stormy was used for breeding habits and gestation periods for the elephant reproductive rights. So Stormy, he was only there for about a year. He was a year old when the zoo deemed him a surplus animal, meaning that his time in the program was no longer needed and he was done. So he was sold to a trainer named Ken Kishhelm in 1974. Kishhelm only had him for a year, and he sold him to a husband-wife training team of Mike and Sally LaTorres. The LaTorreses trained him to be a circus animal and a show animal because that's what they did. That was their forte. They used methods of training on a thing called the bull hook and water and food deprivation. Just deprived them of water and food. So had a grueling schedule of training. And you got to understand that training an elephant to do certain tricks is not good for them. Like standing on their hind legs or standing on their front legs. Their massive bodies can't handle that kind of pressure, and eventually bad things are going to happen to these animals. And doing circus tricks and training elephants to do these tricks that are unnatural to them is a leading cause of death in domesticated elephants. So next time you go to a show, kind of remember that this is kind of harmful to them. So anyways, they traveled around for going from circus to circus throughout the country in a dilapidated trailer and not very good conditions. The only bright side to it is Sally. Sally was caring and loving and took care of Stoney. She was like a human mother to Stoney. So that was the bright side, and Stoney was happy. Well, 13 years into his relationship with the Torreses, Sally and Mike divorced, and Stoney was left with Mike. Well, the safety that Stoney had and the love that Stoney had was gone. After the divorce, his life just took a turn for the worst in his caring. Mike, for years, went from circus to circus with Stoney and continued the grueling training. Well, in 1993, Mike signed Stoney a contract to perform at the Luxor Hotel here in Las Vegas in a show called Winds of the Gods. It was a variety show, and Stoney performed in a circus-like atmosphere. Well, about a year into the show in 1994, Stoney was backstage warming up for one of his performances, and he was going to stand up on his hind legs, and he just fell, screaming in agonizing pain. Stoney had torn a hamstring in his left rear leg. So what happened next is really sad. So they had to move Stoney. They actually put him in a bin to stand him up, get him to stand up, put him in a bin, a big dumpster-like thing, took him back of the hotel, put him in a shed that had no ventilation system, had no windows, was very dark. So he was in there for hours just crying in pain. So they finally brought in what they call a cattle crush, which is like a cage-like thing that they stand the animals up in, and it kind of pushes on their sides to hold them up to keep them from getting to the ground, which is not good for the elephant. So he was in this thing, in this shed I just discussed, still in pain and crying. Stoney, for one, was undernourished because Mike, throughout Stoney's life, kept him underweight because he thought that a smaller, thinner elephant was easier to control and manage. Well, when he came to the Luxor is telling him, you got to fatten this animal up. You got to fatten him up because he's like, doesn't look healthy. To no avail, nothing. He just kept feeding him hay and grain. Elephants need vegetables and fruits to sustain their weight. They can't just survive and be healthy on just grains and wheat. So anyways, he's in this thing, crying in pain, just left there. He was in this thing for a year in this storage shed. They came in, vets were telling Mike, you got to get this animal to some kind of rehab, you got to feed him, you got to do this. The U.S. Department of Agriculture came in and cited him on several citations for the neglect the animal is in. They came in and they saw him just surrounded by his own feces and just caked with flies. Found him undernourished. So they gave Mike citations to no avail. He did nothing about it. Well, a year later, they're trying to figure out they're going to move Stormy to Arkansas to an elephant rehab. After a year long of being in pain in this environment, they decide they're going to move him to Arkansas to an elephant rehab to get him help and try to get him healthy again. Well, the story goes that they had to figure out a way to get him from where he was to outside to the crane to load him on the special made truck. So when they attempted to do this, they got him out of the cage, moved him. Stoney screaming in pain because his leg hasn't healed in a year. He's still in excruciating pain. Started moving, and because he couldn't put a lot of weight on his left rear leg, the right rear leg buckled. And it was determined that he broke the femur in the right rear leg and he fell to the ground. So they were trying to figure out how they're going to get him up, get him in this truck, and get him to Arkansas. And you had protesters out front because they were heard of the move, and they were protesting the treatment, and they were protesting, what was going on, and so it was hard to get him out. So he was there for 2 days. 2 days on the ground, they're trying to figure out how to get Stoney into this truck, get him to Arkansas to get him help. Well, in comes walking Mike. Stoney sees Mike, and you gotta understand, Stoney's still in a lot of pain. Now he's got a broken femur on one leg and still got a torn hamstring on the other. He reaches out his trunk to Mike in a way that says, help me, I'm hurting, whatever, you think what you want to think. But he was reaching out for help. To the only friend he thought he had, to the only one he knew. He was with Mike for 20 years. They were together for 20 years. What does Mike do? He goes over there and he pushes the trunk out of the way and he goes, knock it off, Stoney, get up. That's what this guy did to this animal that loved him and was loyal to him. So what happened next? A couple different versions. I'm going to give you what I think happened and what I read in more than one article. That when Mike pushed Stoney's trunk out of the way and told him to get up, he laid his head on the ground and he passed away in agonizing pain, still crying for help, still needing. It's just pain. Nobody did anything to help this animal. Nothing. He was in pain for a year, and then he lay on the ground for 2 days with a broken femur and a torn hamstring. And he sat there on this cold floor, and he passed away, probably brokenhearted. So this is why I'm pissed off at this whole thing. This animal did nothing, Stoney, did nothing for 20 years but perform for people and try to make them happy. And to get treated like this by the guy, I'm sure he made a lot of money off of him. So long story short, well, it's not really that short, but Stormy was brought here to the Craig Road Pet Cemetery. And Stoney is right here. Stoney the elephant, a gentle giant. A loving, caring, breathing creature that lived out the last year of his life in agonizing pain. And the person who was supposed to care about him didn't give two craps about him. But anyways, this tree right here in front of me is right in the middle of Stoney's grave. So he was buried right here. The hole was 15 by 15 and 20 feet deep. They buried Stoney in his entirety. He was not cremated. His 7,000-pound body is buried right here in this area. And what drew me to Stoney in particular, his story, is I read about Stoney in a book about haunted Las Vegas. So there's been several people coming here to visit their pets, and they look and they see this massive gray elephant roaming around, just grazing on the vegetation. And every person that says that they've seen him says he's happy and he looks like he's enjoying himself, minding his own business. So that makes me happy, because at least I know that Stoney is now out of pain and he's resting easy. I'm gonna come here with my partner Kelly, because this cemetery I can get into at night, and I'm gonna do a full-fledged investigation of Stoney's grave and the cemetery, because I hear there's a lady in white that walks around here too. But anyways, I wanted to share Stoney's sad story with you, and it's disgusting. Just a creature that wanted to be loved. And the sad thing is, he was only 22 when he died, and that was a young elephant. The elephants in the wild live 60 to 70 years. An elephant living in captivity without the rigorous training and without putting all the strain on their body of what this man put him through can live up to 80 years. Stoney was 22 years old. Think about that. That's like a 22-year-old human being. He was young. He had so much life left in him. But no, he was used and he was abused, and he died young. Okay. Thank you.